Welcome to episode 2 of Creepify, True or False, the original animated web series where I put together illustrations with creepy and bizarre stories, and you guess which ones really happened. At the end of each episode, I'll tell you what tales were factual and which were fabricated. Story number 1. Hello, my name's Bryce. My brother Miles was my hero. I was too stubborn to say it 10 years ago, but I have no problem admitting it now. He was only 3 years older than me, but you know how it is. When you're 13, the 16-year-olds are the cool kids. Everyone liked Miles. He was a magnet for accolades, and boy was he smart. My parents had left us home one night so they could see the gray. They used to have date nights on the first Friday of every month. Miles and I were watching Netflix downstairs in the living room. He went upstairs to get something from his bedroom, and I checked my phone while I waited for him to get back. You know how people say they get a terrible feeling or a sense of dread when something bad is about to happen? Well, I didn't. Not at first. Maybe I'm out of touch, but I was just glad it was Friday and content that I'd finished all my weekend homework early. I was checking my phone when I heard my brother yelling for me outside from the woods. My mind couldn't comprehend how he'd gotten out there so quickly from upstairs, but I instinctually ran out there to try to find him. When I opened the door and looked outside, that's when something told me not to go. I don't know if there was something out there or if it was just a hunch, but I couldn't go any further. Then Miles surprised me from behind. He'd never left the house and said that he didn't hear anything. I tried explaining that I heard him from outside, but he said it was probably the TV or something. We went back to watching TV, although I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. We went to bed a few hours later, and I passed out in bed while playing on my phone. All of a sudden, a scream woke me up from my sleep. It was my brother again. I rushed to his bedroom only to find he wasn't in it. He was nowhere inside. I heard him again and realized the screams were coming from outside. My parents hadn't come back, so I begrudgingly went outside and heard his voice pleading from the woods. It sounded like he was getting farther and farther away the more I chased after him. I ran so deep into the woods that the lights from my house waned to a faint glow, and I found myself without the bravery to seek him out any longer. I've always hated myself for that. My parents got back about a half hour later. My dad tried to placate the situation, but my mother fell to pieces. I still remember the way the swarm of police lights from outside turned the whole block red and blue with flashing lights. I was too caught up with my own thoughts to pay attention to what my parents talked to the police about, but I remember that they were there for a while. I didn't sleep for days. Like I said, it's been 10 years and my brother never came home. My parents aren't the same, nor am I. I miss Miles every day. Story 2. This story was told to me by a friend back in the early aughts. My brother Ross and I were in high school at the time. It was in the late 90s. We were watching some TV, probably South Park if my memory serves correct, when there was a knock at the front door. It was one of the neighbor kids. I'll call him Zach. I'd seen him before, but I didn't personally know him. At first sight, I could tell the kid was panicked. We brought Zach in and sat him down on the chair. The poor guy was all but paralyzed with fear, but eventually he told us what happened. He was in his bedroom working on homework when he heard a commotion in the living room where his mother and brother were. When he went to peek in at what was going on, he saw they were being attacked. He knew he couldn't defend himself or his family, so he hid under his bed. Now, this was a time before cell phones were so common. Text messaging was unheard of, and not everyone had a landline in his or her room, so he was powerless to call anyone for help. He just waited until the screaming stopped. When he went out to the living room, the intruder appeared to be gone, but his mother and brother had been killed. He couldn't tell if he was lucky to be alive or cursed to witness such a horrible crime. After he told us the story, he called the police from our house. They never ended up finding the killer, and Zach ended up suffering from some pretty bad emotional problems in school. He ended up in foster care, which I'm sure most people know is a pretty rough system. Now, years later, my brother Ross and I were playing with a Ouija board. This was before all the horror stories about the game had surfaced, so we were a bit more incredulous. We got the scene set the Ouija board up, and started playing. It took a little while, but the planchette started to move around the board. You know how it goes. We both accused each other of being the one who was moving the planchette around the board, and neither would admit it. I now realize that it wasn't actually being moved by either of us. But that wasn't the strangest part. We had a cockatiel back then named Merle. He was a quite cute and talkative bird. Right when we became convinced the Ouija board was actually moving itself, Merle spoke and said, "I killed the kids." Now it's time to find out which of our stories was true and which was false. The first story, where Bryce hurt his older brother in the woods, only for Miles to actually go missing and never be heard again, that story was fabricated. The second story was where a boy witnessed the murder of his family in the next room, went to Ross and his brother's house for safety, and then Ross and his brother's cockatiel said, "I killed the kids." That's too crazy sounding, right? Wrong. This is actually a true story. Thanks so much for tuning in to Creepify True or False, Episode 2. I greatly appreciate your support and time. I'm trying to make this something I get to work on more, and hope that it will be someday. I'm anxious to hear any questions or suggestions in the comments. Thanks so much, and have a spooky day.